Storytelling for me needs to happen without the guest realizing it. And where it goes wrong for brands, especially restaurants, is when you, as a guest, walk in and you sit down, leads a lot from the service team who will come and give you this big bhashan on where the peanut went and why it got fermented and why it stayed 100 days in a cave and blah, 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 blah. But it's a peanut at the end of the day.
As someone who's been eating out and writing about restaurants for more than a decade, the meals that are the most memorable to me are the ones where I'm able to build a connection. I'm not necessarily referring to the actual copy that's on a menu, but how a restaurant's holistic vision is communicated to a diner when they walk in for a meal, right from the vendors they pick to the farmers they work with to the recipes they create. All of these elements come together to ultimately tell a story. And that's where restaurant group Hungerin truly shines. Hungerin is the parent company of some of the best F&B ventures in India today. I'm talking about the Bombay Canteen, or Pedro, Bombay Sweet Shop, and of course, Veronicas. Today, I'm chatting with founders Yash and Samir to understand how this storytelling approach feeds into all of their businesses that are counted amongst India's and Asia's very best. Hi, Sam and Yash. Welcome to Big Food Energy.
Hey, Smitha. Lovely to be here.
Such a nice name for a podcast. How did you come up with it?
There is a very catchy term that's
What's it
otherwise.
What is it called?
What's that
I
term?
wouldn't know about it.
Yeah, I don't think I
Please
know about
enlighten
it.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that later. But thank you so much for being on the podcast. I've always enjoyed dining at all of your restaurants and ordering in from all of your F&B ventures. So I'm very excited to get into what you guys really do. First, for everyone who is listening, could you explain what Hunger Inc. does? Like I'm five.
Hunger Inc. is the name of our company, which we started back in 2014. And it started off with the simple thought that when Yash and I were classmates at Cornell's Hotel School, we really just wanted to open a restaurant at some point in our lives. We obviously met Chef Floyd along the way, and that's kind of how our journey started. And Hunger Inc., in a nutshell, sort of tries to bring joy to your life through food in every way, shape, or form. It started off with the Bombay Canteen in 2015, Pedro in 2017, Bombay Sweet Shop, which is our online and e-commerce mithai shop, which started in 2020, and most recently Enthucutlet, which is our F&B magazine, and Veronicas, which is a sandwich shop with soul of a cocktail bar.
And where did the idea of starting a restaurant that's sort of rooted in Indian cuisine, but also playful and fun come from? Because whenever I've gone to, like I said, to any of your places, there's always a big element of fun. No one is taking themselves too seriously, and that energy sort of feeds into everything that you do. So where did the idea come from?
One of the things about that you said that no one's taking themselves seriously, I think it comes also from all of us. We say this a lot to our team that we do take our work seriously, but we don't take each other seriously. We opened Bombay Canteen in 2015, but the thought process of it began maybe early 2013 when Samir was working in New York with the Dynamite group of restaurants. Being in the industry for so long, one of the great things that you do is also travel a lot just for inspiration and motivation. And as I was doing that through Southeast Asia, Samir was doing it in the US. One of the things we saw very clearly was all these countries were started looking inwards a lot. People talking about their ingredients, people talking about their own cuisine, the food they grew up with, right? There was always this thought between Samir and me that we wanted to do something and we wanted to do it in Bombay. So we had come back to Bombay to just do a small recce trip. And there were a lot of great restaurants, but there was a lot of Western culture that was being cut, copy, pasted. Burgers, pizzas, pastas. No one was looking inwards at that point. And there are great Indian restaurants. There were great restaurants and there will continue to be great Indian restaurants. But the challenge, we always say this, is even as of today, if someone says, if the three of us on this call were to make a plan, oh, let's go have Indian food for lunch, is that you don't even need to look at the menu. Like while you're in the car, you've already decided what you're going to order. Butter chicken, palak paneer, butter naan, which is delicious. But there's no level of fun there. Also, at the end of the meal, you knew there was not going to be a great cocktail program to it, or the experience is going to leave you like extremely heavy. You're going to need a nap at the end of it, right? So taking these two stories together, that's when the idea of Bombay Canteen came together, was how do we celebrate the India of today? India that is so well known for its hospitality. Like whoever shows up on our doorstep, we always take great care of them. But how do you do it in a much more casual, fun way? And all of us were also like of that age where we didn't take ourselves too seriously. So that dream team of me, Samir, and Floyd came together at the start. Then Chef Thomas came on board. The whole idea then was this restaurant is not just about the food, it's about celebrating India. So, yes, we're going to put in enough effort in getting our food right, but the same effort needs to go into getting the drink program right, in getting the hospitality right.
You talked about how you guys had a sense of the kind of restaurant that you wanted to build. And of course, you brought in Chef Floyd, who was already doing amazing things at Tabla. What was the perspective that Floyd brought in? Because he was sort of helping build Indian cuisine outside of India, whereas you were trying to talk to Indian diners within India. Um, what was that like in terms of what his perspectives were, and how did you build that story out with him?
Both Yash and I came up with the original draft of what the restaurant should be based on our inspirations working in Singapore and New York at that point. But it was truly Floyd that sort of added the, no pun intended, flavor to that draft. I think we came with the thought process of the casualness, the approachability. The two parts which I remember quite clearly actually now are that one, he was very clear in terms of the fact that we will use only local ingredients, that we will be a seasonally driven restaurant, the fact that we will be cooking in sort of small plates and large plates, which eventually became the Chota Bada Patiala of the Bombay Canteen menu. That came from conversations with him, and those were sort of the guardrails we set for ourselves at that point. And whenever you open a restaurant, you're only sort of halfway there. If you're good, if you're really lucky, you're 75% there. I still remember how many iterations of that menu we had to go through in the first year and a half to actually come up with a method to the madness of what is working. Restaurants never change their menu. In fact, all the advice we got as we were setting up was don't try to change the menu. Guess what? Once they like it, they want to come back only for that. And that's true. Ex Kejival, the Bali salad, there's certain dishes that will never leave. But I think it's that excitement of what else comes with every new change of season is also what brings people back in. So I think being able to marry that marry those two thoughts came very initially from those conversations with Chef Floyd.
So take me back to before you launched TBC. You kind of knew what the concept would be. You have Chef Floyd, you have Thomas locked in. How did you go about crafting your story? Were you like, this is what we're going to name the menu, this is what we're going to call different things? Or yeah, if you could tell me about how the story began to actually manifest.
I wish it was that logical.
Yeah, it was freaking irritating. I remember there was one meeting where we sat in a room for 5 hours with a freaking whiteboard, and we left that meeting with decisions we had made in the first 5 minutes of that 5-hour meeting, saying this is what we want to be. We've always had great people around us. Radhika, who's been with us since day one to tell our story. Lisi, who's helped craft that story for what Bombay Canteen is. When you open a restaurant, you're only 50% like of who you are. Like that. What new restaurants today fail to do is continue to evolve their story. There were a couple of things we were very, very specific about when we wanted to tell the story. One was we wanted to be approachable and accessible. So that started off with what do we call ourselves. So the name of the restaurant, to be honest, originally was supposed to be Tiffin Club. 2 months before, a restaurant opened with the name Tiffin something, and I remember Daily Power wrote an article on it. Mumbai Boss wrote an article on it, and we were like, so we had to go back to the drawing board. We didn't want people to think that this is going to be like a celebrity chef-driven restaurant. We wanted the space to be something that people can come throughout the day. Even if you walk in wearing a pair of flip-flops to someone doing a business meeting, both feel comfortable in their own space. And we were lucky that we had found the literal physical space which had that volume to it. So that's why the name canteen came up, is that everyone in their life has been to a canteen, and you'll always not like the food there, but it was more about that story you shared with that person, right? So if it was your school ka canteen, you spoke about some maybe school teacher or something or someone, but at work you were like bitching about your boss, right? But it was that meeting around food and having stories being shared, right? So that's why Canteen came about. Bombay, because we just love the city, and like both of us are not in Bombay, from Bombay, but it's always been the city that's given us so much. Then, that 5 hour meeting was like, I hate this thing in India where you either have to be a restaurant, you have to be a bar, or you be a cafe. You have to like put yourself in
Yeah.
this freaking silo. And I get why is because the person on the other side, a lot of us live in a food and restaurant bubble. But how do you get across to the consumer in language they understand? So actually, Bombay Canteen was called Bombay Canteen Indian Cafe and Bar. Did you know this?
Really?
Yeah,
No, I
There
did
was
not know
it was
that. That
always
was
written
the
very
first.
tiny right
yeah,
below
below it.
in the
Yeah,
first iteration.
Wow.
But just to add to what Yash was saying earlier as well, right? Like I think one of the few people who we also got on board to tell the story, and I think at that point was the story of through the space as well. And I think Ayaz coming in a very early meeting saw the old and new of the food coming together, and that's kind of how the space came together. The ruin of an old bungalow juxtaposed with the Art Deco style of post-independence Bombay. Unknowingly, we were telling the story in different mediums, which was happening again and again, whether it was through the communications, whether it was through the design of the menus and the sort of all the branding that came about, or the space as well. All of it sort of fed into that sort of core thought that it was the old and the new of India coming together and celebrating India, and that in every way, shape, and form. We were so heavily rooted in nostalgia in the beginning, and suddenly we were finding like a lot of copycats sort of showing up, which like looked at nostalgia in the same way, right? And
Yeah.
that's fine. And I still remember it's kind of the origin story even for a bunch of other things we've done, but like the first birthday celebration for Bombay Canteen was a collaboration way before four-hand dinners and pop-ups became sort of the rule of thumb in our industry.
Yeah.
We actually collaborated with all our mothers to make our favorite food. At our first birthday, our moms would cook our favorite food, and we called it the mother of all menus. And I think it was the first time we saw in front of us how people responded to a story being told through a menu and being sort of showcased to them in the form of the food. The moms were there. There was a lot of sort of excitement around that over that week. And it was our first sort of tryst with that form of storytelling. Honestly, the version of modern India that existed in 2014, when we were thinking of this, was smoke and mirrors. It was a ton
Yeah.
of liquid nitrogen being thrown around for no reason. And we didn't want to be associated
yeah.
with that.
I love how Sam says it with a straight face. I'm still laughing at this point already.
We'll take this offline after this.
What is the story that you're pushing at the moment, or how has the story evolved to this point?
Since year one, we've always invested in having a great cocktail and a beverage program, but that wasn't something that was getting highlighted a lot. So year two onwards, the focus was how do we create those storybooks, which became our cocktail books, where how do you create the experience of ordering a cocktail fun and exciting so that more people start ordering cocktails, right? And every year that cocktail book has changed to focus on a different part of Bombay, whereas it started with the Art Deco books, Art Deco architecture of Bombay, then we spoke about the talkies of Bombay. I do feel now when a guest walks into Bombay Canteen, they know what they're going to get. Like they know that the menu is going to be has changed. Some of the dishes that they really like are not going to be there. But what they do really, really like is the kind of experience in terms of our team has been able to build. The conversations they have with our team members, the where it's as an equal, like hospitality first, where they know we are going to take care of them. I feel that's the story that we always wanted to tell since year one because service is very integral to what Samir and me believed how we want this restaurant to be, and we feel we are seeing the benefits of it now. In the early days, it took us time. Even simple things like we don't like to put, we don't like to serve the food. We just want to keep the bowl in front of you and we want you all to take the food themselves. So we used to not tell our team members that you don't need to go serve it. If someone asks you to, obviously help them. But like some of those things we wanted to break down to make the service more approachable, more fun, and not being stuck up to a certain level. And I feel we see the benefits because now guests have recognized it more. And in spite, they won't message us saying, oh, the food was amazing because that's a given, but they will message saying,
Yeah.
I was at the canteen yesterday, Chitranjan was at our table and he's just phenomenal. And that's what I want to hear more of is because it's those personalities within the restaurant. It's not just a head chef, it's not the head bartender, it's but everyone within the restaurant, which makes a difference to a guest experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember this one time I was at O Pedro with some family, and I think my mom said, the volume's a bit loud. Should we ask them to turn it down? And before we knew it, the volume had been turned down because our server was watching our table and he saw my mom do this. And immediately, like, the volume went down. So, and we were just like blown away. We were like, oh, where is this guy? Like, what is going on? But really, it's the small things, and the small things are what you remember. That was maybe 2 years, 3 years ago, um, and that's what stays with you. Talk to me about O Pedro. Talk to me about Bombay Sweet Shop and Veronica's. Have you had a similar process with your other ventures?
O Pedro was us finishing 2 years at Bombay Canteen, knowing that we wanted to do another restaurant. Chef Hussain at that point was a sous chef at Bombay Canteen, and we knew he was ready to have his own restaurant. We hadn't decided what kind of restaurant we wanted to do. And it was a very interesting story because we were scouting locations. Whereas at Bombay Canteen, we knew we wanted to do Indian food and then we went out looking for locations.
Right.
When it came to O Pedro, because we were just so busy taking care of Bombay Canteen, it was not something we were like going out, but you always had people coming and saying, oh, I have this space, I have that space. So we used to go and see it. And we saw the space where O Pedro is right now, which is in BKC, which for anyone on the podcast doesn't know where BKC is. It's like this complex where people go to work. It's just glass and steel buildings and it has no soul to it.
Where souls go to die.
Where
Or make
souls
money.
go to die, but it looks beautiful. You could be in a Hong Kong, you could be in Singapore, you could be anywhere. So we found this space. We had really liked the space because Samir and me really like spaces where a lot of natural light comes in. So it had a huge frontage. It had beautiful trees in front of it, obviously manicured trees, but it felt really nice. So we knew we wanted to take up the space. It was me, Samir, Floyd, and Thomas who went to see the space, and Floyd instinctively said, let's do Mexican food. And we all agreed. That night, Floyd traveled back to New York. Samir was actually traveling to Portugal for a vacation. And I started thinking back that one, between us four, we never really used to say yes so often to each other so fast. And why did we agree on saying Mexican food is because we miss it, right? We four, we miss it because we are well traveled. But also, if you think about Mexican food, any part of the world you go to, even if you're in Shanghai and you've met a friend after a long time and he or she says, let's go for Mexican tonight, you will always say yes because you're not worried on what kind of space it's going to be. It's just going to be a fun night. There'll be great music, tacos, nachos, margaritas, and you don't need to think about it, right? But if you think of the cuisine itself within India, is we've grown up on the wrong kind of Mexican food, right? Like it's delicious, but it's not what Mexican food is. So the worry again was that we would have to go through a certain educational phase to get people to understand what Mexican food is. Two, at that point, this is 2017, 2016, avocados were like 150 for one avocado and didn't really make for a really sustainable business. So I asked myself the question that Mexico became that place because a lot of the United States or Americans used to travel to Mexico for a honeymoon,
Party.
spring break, to party, right? It was their happy place. Also through immigration, the cuisine moved across, right, in its rightful form and then moved all across the world. So the simple question was that in BKC, Mexican would be that happy place for people, but we don't have context to it. So imagine if you are working in one of these glass and steel buildings and it's like 2 p.m. and you want to take a nap and you close your eyes and you just want to imagine you're in some other place, right? What would be that place that these people would imagine? And like for all of us, that happy place is Goa, right? Like Goa is a place that will bring a smile on everyone's face just thinking about it. It's like a state of mind. And that's when the thing was that for us, Goa was the Mexico of India because it behaves like that. There's a beautiful culture to it. There's a beautiful story. The food is so different. People are so different. And it made the perfect components for a restaurant concept. And that's how Pedro came about.
In parallel to that, Yash was also, both Yash and I were actually traveling to New York to help Chef Floyd open Pawala. And I think right as we started working on the project for O Pedro, Yash had this wonderful sort of life experience, which I'll better let him explain before I'll take back over.
More than that life experience, it was Samir and me used to always say that, building restaurants in this really expensive cities is not easier said than done. And the kind of restaurants we wanted to build were very experience driven.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it was becoming a real estate game at the end of the day, and we wanted to come up with products and products that would sit within the parent company's philosophy of celebrating India through food. At that point, whenever you opened a restaurant, the restaurateurs got into products by making a hot sauce or making a
Yeah.
makhani sauce, a byproduct of what you were anyways doing, which wasn't what we wanted to get into at that point. So it was like two instances. I was actually, Floyd was opening Power Line and needed some help, and I was passing through the Paris airport, and I've still never been to France, but I picked up a jar of mustard in duty free and got it back because Nico, who's German, she loves mustard, so I got it for her. And then the next time I was passing through the Turkish airport, again to go to New York. Never been to Turkey again at the airport. But this local Turkish guy in duty free, with super passion, was trying to sell me Turkish delights and baklava. But you could see this person really had passion towards his product. And I had just flown through Bombay, where everyone's passion is to sell Kit Kats and Milka and Shivasri at the
Johnny
end.
Walker.
Johnny Walker,
Yeah.
right? And that made me think, and I know I came back fully excited from that trip, and I took Sam and Thomas to Phoenix Mint to go sit at a cafe and tell them I made a presentation on why can't we do what we did with Indian food at Bombay Canteen with Indian sweets as a brand, but very product retail focused, where it starts off as an experience where we create this mithai Willy Wonka factory because people feel that mithais are boring, it's not something you want to eat, it's not something you want to experience, and then get into the retail products. So that was how Bombay Sweet Shop was born. Actually, the idea came before O Pedro, but none of us, all four of us, including Hussein, five of us never had made Indian sweets before. So it got shelved for some time, saying we don't have the right expertise on board to be doing this. Let's start working on it. So we opened O Pedro and then we got into it. Because then I remember Chef Girish came to meet us while we were building O Pedro, and we took him to Yaucha for lunch, trying to convince him to come on board to start working on Bombay Sweet Shop, even like 2017. His dream was always to relook at Iyengar bakeries. How Iyengar bakeries are, is there a new world to it? So that those worlds came together really, really well. And yeah, that's how Bombay Sweet Shop was born. We opened in 7 days before the lockdown. Planned it really, really well.
The lockdown kind of really helped Bombay Sweet Shop, of course, because everyone was sending each other care packages. And yeah, I remember sending a whole bunch of those hampers to a bunch of people. And by the end of like the lockdown cycle, I think I was very well versed with like each of your products because I had also received them so many times from so many different people. I was like, okay, any of your SKUs, I know what that tastes like.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a fun brand for us also because honestly, it's been 3 years of running it and we still don't know how to run it. It's a great learning to be in the
Cool.
retail e-commerce space.
To me, Bombay Sweet Shop was like the school gift I could give, to whenever I was traveling. But now it's at the airport. I'm like, damn it, now everyone knows I'm not cool anymore. Tell me about Veronica's because Veronica's is quite different as compared to O Pedro and the Bombay Canteen. It's not really celebrating India so much as it is maybe celebrating Bandra. But yeah, talk to me about that.
Celebrating Bandra, but more specifically, it's celebrating Chef Floyd. Ever since he passed, one thing that both was very near and dear to all our hearts was the fact that we wanted to do something as a tribute and a sort of celebration of him more than anything else. And I think the idea kind of germinated when we found out that Jude Bakery was available to be rented. And I think given how Chef Floyd always called himself a pav wala, to take an sort of historic pav bakery, which he actually used to go to as a kid, and to be actually able to reimagine it. And the sandwich part was obviously came through the lockdown where we were experimenting with various ideas. One of the early sort of thought processes which we sort of had Well, not so early. Actually, it came much later in the lockdown. In the first lockdown, I think we just delivered whatever we used to make, and then we realized that eventually, what people want at home is comfort. So why not give them what we would crave, from the pastrami sandwiches to the burgers to the fried chicken sandwiches, etc. And I think of all the concepts that we were able to launch during the pandemic as a sort of for survival, I think the Sandwich Shack, which as we called it, was the most popular one. So when we found out that Jude Bakery was available, I think the idea of taking a pav bakery and sort of evolving that into a sandwich shop was just poetic, and like it was something which is something that we truly wanted to do as a celebration of for Chef Floyd. And that's kind of how that took root. So which is why I think it's very different from everything else that we did, was because I think meaning for us personally is very different from like opening all the other restaurants and brands which were rooted in sort of the market and like what we wanted to do as a company, etc. This is a project out of love more than anything else.
You are still very much rooted in Bandra culture, so much so that you were on a Spotify billboard. There was a
Without
joke
us
about,
knowing.
Yeah,
which is amazing.
That was cool.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember I was traveling and Namita from our team sent us that thing and I thought she'd photoshopped it. Yeah.
But
In the
yeah,
last few
it's
months,
incredible.
it's taken a life
because-
of its own. It's taken a life of its own in the
Yeah.
last few months.
Are you talking about the line at Veronica's or the
Actually,
billboard?
Veronica's does not have a queue. I was there yesterday.
Really?
But you know what? We never really expected Veronica's to have a queue, right? Because we also opened at 8 in the morning,
Yeah.
which like where in that first 2 months, like I don't think I'd ever woken up at 7, ever. I was just like cursing myself, like why did we have to do this 8 in the morning concept? So there were a couple of things I feel for Veronica's which came together really well. One is Bandra has become a great hub for great coffee, right? And I've said this
Yeah.
again and again, is that made us step up our game. Like none of our concepts before this serve great coffee, which because it's never part of that experience that we ever thought of it. So we knew we wanted to do that from day one, but we wanted it to end at when the moment that coffee comes to you as fast as possible. It's just a warm, great cup of coffee. And the work that goes in to put that coffee program doesn't need to be like thrown out. So I feel our neighbors or whoever in Bandra, the coffee brands made us really step up our game on that point. And I feel that really also the fact that you can get a great sandwich and a great coffee. And then in the evening, like to have that transition that during the day you drink coffee and at evening you drink wine. And the wine program is also built on the same ethos that you're getting great wine. But the menu is so fun, it's broken down by occasions, it doesn't take itself seriously. And I feel it's one of the best well-priced menus in the city. So like to have people come in for a burger and a glass of wine, like that's like the perfect combination for us. But it has become Bandra's subculture. When I want to feel young, I go eat there.
At Veronica.
Yeah. It's like,
At the old age of 37.
I was thinking about this yesterday. I was in my 20s when we opened Bombay Canteen.
That is true.
Nonsense.
If there's one thing you take away from this podcast, it's that time passes.
Forward
Okay,
direction.
I think that all of your restaurants have really found a way to embed yourself within culture. So, and I think a lot of that, is a testament to the language that you've sort of built out at each of your places. So, the Bombay Canteen has its Great Day to Bombay. The Bombay Sweet Shop has, what your T-shirt says, Yash, in a world full of croissant via kasturi. And of course, Veronica has a whole bunch. So, and I do know that you work with Please See as well to build a lot of your language out. So if you could talk to me a little bit about that partnership and how that works.
That I think it's been such an amazing journey with both Pritha and Avi and the whole team there. I think we started working on something as simple as like logo and brand design and menus, etc. But it's sort of evolved to so much more. Beginning part was a lot of like conversations back and forth. And I think truly now, I think all of us believe the iterative process in which you need to work. I think in a world full of croissants, be a kachori or it's a good day to Bombay, have all come through sort of years of like living and breathing the brands. But I think it's always been like rooted with the same sort of thought process of like, what are we doing for our community, right? Like, and what I mean by that is, I think when Bombay Canteen was in the first few months, like I think we were super fortunate to get the response that we did. And we said, if we are all about celebrating India, like what better day to do that than the 15th of August? And I remember, I think they were based in Bandra at that time, please see, and we going to the office, sitting down, and Avinash passionately sort of explaining to us about like taking the idea of a langar from a gurdwara and then doing something for the community and bringing all the tables together. And that conversation led to what is the most beautiful sort of day for all of us at Hungerin and beyond, which is the Independence Day Dawat. For those who don't know, the Independence Day Dawat on every 15th of August, we join all the tables and turn Bombay Canteen into a langar, which serves a banana leaf thali, which serves one dish each from different states of India. So usually thalis are regional. This is a thali of India. And you can come in and pay whatever you want, and all the proceeds go to a cause that we all believe in as a team. I think in year one, we raised about 1.7 lakh or 1.8 lakh rupees, served about 180 people. I think this year, for the first time ever, this was our first full Dawat post-COVID. We served over 1,000 people in those same 4 hours and raised about 16, 17 lakh rupees. I think with each one of the brands, whether it's Pedro, whether it's Bombay Sweet Shop, or even Veronica's now, it's constant conversations that lead to sort of how the story evolves more than anything else. And I'm sure Yash has his point of view on that.
Our idea of storytelling was either putting up a poster in the elevator of the hotel or putting up a sunboard somewhere, right? And storytelling for me, for a brand, needs to happen like without the guest realizing it. It needs to happen in small parts over the space, collectively with the team. And where it goes wrong for brands, especially restaurants, is when you as a guest walk in and you sit down, is it leads a lot from the service team, who will come and give you this big bhashan on where the peanut went and why it got fermented and why it stayed 100 days in a cave and blah 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 blah. But it's a peanut at the end of the day. Onus of storytelling comes on that poor guy who's spilling this to you. Whereas if like any of our spaces, and we learned that a lot through Veronica's, is we've become so used to planning out guest experiences, like this is where this will say, it seamlessly flows through. Like to your point, where Bombay Canteen now is, or even O Pedro, is the smaller things, right, which keep bringing you back. And 1 out of maybe 20 people realize it, but a lot of them over time get to it. With Plisi, I feel it's always been that mirror that we've held across to each other. I feel their agency's also grown phenomenally over the last 8 years. And so have we. So it's great to have that partner where we can have these honest conversations to say that, yes, we need to sell at the end of the day, but we don't need to be like selling through any of our, we don't need a tagline. Like I remember year one, we used to be like, what's our tagline? Now we don't really care about that so much. So it's taken us time. Like I was saying with Bombay Sweet Shop, the kind of communication we plan to do or we want to do is going to revolve around us, our central internal thought of creating the Indian sweets revolution, right? But it started off with reimagining Indian mithai. And the idea of saying join the Indian sweets revolution is because we as founders, as the team, actually believe in that much more. Because Hungering's core has always been innovation. We've always been great at innovating, but the product at the end of the day has been approachable and accessible. And hence, like that story is also evolved, and then having someone like an Avinash and Pratha to hold that mirror to us has been very important.
You were talking about your servers and how ultimately the onus of storytelling sometimes rests on the servers. But I find that the servers at all of your places do a very good job in communicating just what exactly the story is. So I'm sure there's an extensive service angle and training angle to this. If you could talk to me a little bit about that, like how does that work?
Step one to that is obviously been in India, like I think one of the things that was very evident to both Yash and me as we went through our careers moving from India to abroad and back was the attitude that service equals servitude here, right? Like there is a class hierarchy between like those who are being served and those who are serving, and that's kind of like we all love traveling the world and like sitting at our favorite bar and chatting with the bartender, but how often would we do that a decade ago here? It was also a function of giving the autonomy, for the lack of a better word, or the confidence to tell your teams that go ahead, have the conversations. There is no sort of rules. If you want to speak in Hindi, feel free to speak in Hindi. And that has taken years for it to build, right? I think that is sort of the foundation on which it is based. And then you layer it on with things like where you train for recognizing who is in the mood for what. Like if you're 5 suits sitting at a table, you don't want to know where the peanut has come from. But if you recognize that someone's celebrating, someone's really into their food, someone wants to know more, someone wants, like recognizing those sort of cues and then taking them down that journey.
The difference I feel was also when the 3 founders that came together to open Bombay Canteen, we had all worked in the industry. Like I started my career working as a waiter, did that for 3 years, and having been on the other side of it, you realize at that point, I thought at 18 years old, having moved to 20 years old, moving to Bombay for the first time, that we were at the cutting edge of the Italian restaurant that I was working at. But having then doing bartending in Chicago, Singapore, it made me realize that I never knew anything about my product. Like we were never let to taste, like at the pizza place. I wouldn't have even, someone asked me where this cheese comes from, I wouldn't know. Whereas right now, our team would know exactly because they've tasted it and they've been told the story about it as well. It starts from there, right? Also creating training programs which are available to them in a medium that they want. So we used to do our trainings. Everyone used to get a paper sheet, but instead of that, we also started a closed Instagram group only for the teams, where each dish, the photo of the dish was there, but it was a carousel where the ingredients also were shown and the description. So on your way to work on something, it's a medium, you're always on Instagram. You could easily just go through it in a format that is so much more approachable to you than a piece of paper and sitting in the train and sitting with a piece of paper. So it's about creating those right mediums for the team. It's taken time, it's taken a lot of training, and I feel it's the robustness of the team we have with us throughout the time that has helped us to get there.
Through my career, as I've interviewed chefs and restaurateurs, they've talked about how it's a performance and how it's really hard and how it takes so much. You put in so much effort for something that will be consumed in like a matter of minutes. And I've always drawn those parallels to writing and just being in the media industry because it's a very similar process. But of course, that brings me to Enthucutlet, which you guys launched about a year ago. Obviously, food publication, food media is a whole other ballgame. But tell me about Enthucutlet and where that idea came from.
I think the idea of Enthucutlet is actually, again, rooted in that story which I told you about, the mother of all menus. I think ever since that happened in 2016, we've always felt that, is there a way to tell the stories of food in India beyond just the plate and the restaurants? And I think the true trigger for moving ahead with Enthucutlet came from the pandemic, where we realized that the 4 walls within which we naturally told these stories kind of disappeared on us. And suddenly all we were left was with social media, where we had to do so much. We had to basically conduct everything we would normally do over there. And Enthucutlet was a direct response to that, where we felt that we shouldn't lose our core of like telling stories of food in India. And I always say food in India and not Indian food, is because I think we also live in a day and age where, yes, I love my chola bhatura, but I also love my hummus, right? Like, why shouldn't I hear about both? And how do we tell those stories which are relevant to today's readers in that manner? And I think that's what Enthucutlet is doing in a nutshell, trying to sort of dig out those unusual food stories of India and tell them in interesting ways. And I think it's been a really fun learning curve over the last year or so of running it, where, like you rightly pointed out, food media and content is a completely different ballgame. And it's been just like Bombay Sweet Shop, it's truly sort of kept us on our toes as well in terms of being able to learn how to respond to what's happening around us and see what's the best version of it that it can become.
We're going to get into a quick rapid fire. Basically, word association, the first thing that comes to your mind.
Is there an iPhone 15 Pro in that hamper?
Lol. Of course.
Then, yeah. Depends
Just
on
said we're bootstrapping this podcast, but yeah, of course. What do you think of when I say modern Indian cuisine?
what a foofy foofa.
Okay.
Oops.
What would you like the future of Indian cuisine to be?
Uncomplicated.
What capital did you start with, and how much of it was your own versus investor capital?
Is that a rapid fire? That's like a fact base.
Like
How's
a-
that rapid fire?
I'm just throwing things at you.
20% investor money, and then the rest was a loan from our families.
Do you have a pet peeve during service? Like if you see a server doing this, it really pisses you off.
Not paying attention to the table.
I hate when they wipe my table a lot of times.
One thing you can't stand a diner doing.
Throwing their weight around.
Someone you wish would come to your restaurant but has to any of your restaurants but has not yet.
Mine would be like either like Wayne Rooney or David Beckham.
David Beckham.
Taylor Swift now. Also Taylor
Taylor
Swift.
Swift.
Hopefully she hears this podcast and gives me a ticket to her Era concert. Considering I'm not getting an iPhone for this.
One piece of advice you wish somebody told you when you guys were starting out.
Bankruptcy is a real thing.
We're done with the rapid fire.
I thought you'll have more controversial questions.
Sure, I can ask you a whole bunch of controversial questions.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to ask them back?
What is the silliest food dish you've eaten during a review?
I think it was a pav bhaji bunny chow. Something. It was just weird. It just didn't work, I feel.
Pav bhaji bunny chow with a butter foam and
Yeah, the pav was doing something weird. It was like floating somewhere. It was strange. I could not have asked for a better episode. So thank you so much for this. I've had a lot of fun, and yeah, I'll see you guys soon.
thank you.
See you soon.
soon.
Thank you.
Like, share, and subscribe to the Big Food Energy podcast for more inspirational and important stories from the world of food.